Priya Agarwal had built her career destroying billion-dollar corporate frauds, never knowing she had just married the man behind India's biggest fake IPO. But when she discovered the truth in their wedding suite, her expertise in financial crimes would seal her fate, because her husband knew she would never stay silent. If you're fascinated by stories where billion-dollar deceptions collide with deadly consequences, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we're diving into cases that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust and betrayal. But let's go back to where it all began. The Oberoi penthouse overlooking Mumbai's Marine Drive had been transformed into a vision of golden opulence on the evening of February 14, 2024. Marigold garlands cascaded from hand-carved pillars while the scent of jasmine and rose petals filled the air, creating an intoxicating atmosphere that would be remembered by the 400 guests as the most spectacular wedding Mumbai's tech elite had ever witnessed. The sacred fire crackled in the center of the mandip, its flames dancing against the backdrop of the Arabian Sea stretching endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Traditional doll players filled the space with rhythmic beats that seemed to pulse with the very heartbeat of the celebration, while servers in crisp white uniforms moved silently through the crowd, carrying silver trays of champagne and traditional sweets. This was more than just a wedding. It was the union of two of India's most powerful tech dynasties, a merger that financial newspapers had been speculating about for months. Priya Agarwal, at 28, had already earned the nickname the Corporate Hunter in Mumbai's business circles. Her firm, Agarwal Analytics, specialized in forensic accounting and corporate fraud detection, services that had made her both wealthy and feared among India's business elite. She had an almost supernatural ability to spot financial irregularities, following paper trails that others couldn't even see, and her testimony had brought down 3 major corporations in the past 2 years alone. Her piercing dark eyes missed nothing, and her methodical approach to unraveling complex financial schemes had made her the go-to expert for investors who suspected they were being deceived. Tonight, dressed in a stunning red and gold lehenga that had been hand-embroidered by artisans in Rajasthan, she looked every inch the radiant bride. But those who knew her well could see the analytical mind still working behind her smile, constantly observing, constantly processing information, even on her wedding day. Rohan Malhotra stood beside her at the mandip, tall and commanding in his cream silk sherwani, looking like the perfect groom from a Bollywood film. At 32, he was the founder and CEO of Quantum Dynamics, a blockchain technology company that had been making waves in India's startup ecosystem for the past 3 years. His charming smile and confident demeanor had won him features on magazine covers and speaking spots at international tech conferences, where he spoke eloquently about revolutionizing digital transactions and creating the future of decentralized finance. Industry publications had called him the blockchain Maharaja, and investors from Silicon Valley to Singapore had been lining up to get a piece of his company. The engagement had been announced 6 months earlier at a private dinner in the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, with both families expressing their delight at the perfect match between Priya's financial expertise and Rohan's technological innovation. Their combined companies were valued at over 800 crore rupees, and business analysts predicted that their union would create one of India's most formidable power couples. As the pundit chanted Sanskrit verses and the couple prepared to take their 7 sacred steps around the fire, guests whispered excitedly about the IPO announcement that had been circulating through Mumbai's financial district all week. Quantum Dynamics was preparing to go public with an initial valuation of $3 billion, a move that would make Rohan one of India's youngest billionaires and cement his position among the country's tech royalty. The wedding reception that followed was a masterpiece of luxury and tradition, with celebrity chef Vikas Khanna personally overseeing a menu that combined international cuisine with traditional Indian delicacies. Bollywood stars mingled with venture capitalists, while renowned classical dancers performed against a backdrop of projection mapping that transformed the walls into a digital art installation. Priya moved through the crowd with natural grace, accepting congratulations and discussing market trends with the same ease, but several guests later noted that she seemed distracted whenever conversation turned to her husband's upcoming IPO, often changing the subject or excusing herself to check her phone. As the night wore on and guests began to disperse, both families gathered for the traditional Vidai ceremony, where Priya would officially leave her child at home to begin her new life as Mrs. Malhotra. Her mother, Sunita Agarwal, wept as she blessed her daughter, while her father, Rajesh, a retired Supreme Court justice, whispered advice about maintaining her independence and continuing to trust her instincts. The newlyweds were driven through Mumbai's empty midnight streets to their penthouse, passing the illuminated gateway of India and the darkened offices of the financial district, where Priya had built her reputation as the woman who could expose any corporate lie. Neither of them spoke during the journey, Priya gazing out at the city lights while Rohan typed furiously on his phone, both lost in their own thoughts about what the future would bring. The penthouse had been prepared for their wedding night, with rose petals scattered across marble floors and candles flickering in every room, creating an atmosphere of romance and intimacy that should have been the perfect beginning to their married life. But as they crossed the threshold together, both were carrying secrets that would transform their fairy tale wedding into the first act of a tragedy that would shock the entire nation. The penthouse silence felt different than the bustling celebration they had just left behind. Priya kicked off her heavy golden sandals and walked barefoot across the cool marble floor toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Mumbai's skyline. The Marine Drive curved like a diamond necklace along the coastline, its street lights twinkling against the dark Arabian Sea. This view had cost Rohan nearly 50 crore rupees, and tonight it was supposed to represent their future together, unlimited and bright as the city spread below them. But something felt wrong, though Priya couldn't quite pinpoint what was causing the unease that had been growing throughout the evening. Behind her, Rohan was already loosening his silk dupatta, his phone still buzzing incessantly with what he claimed were congratulatory messages from international investors excited about Quantum Dynamics' upcoming public offering. The Singapore fund wants to increase their pre-IPO commitment by another 100 million, he said without looking up from his screen. Goldman Sachs is calling it the deal of the decade. We're going to be unstoppable, Priya. She turned to study her husband's face in the soft candlelight, noting the way his eyes never quite met hers when he talked about the IPO. Throughout their 6-month engagement, Rohan had been increasingly secretive about the technical details of his blockchain technology, always deflecting her questions with kisses or promises that she would understand everything once they were officially partners in business as well as marriage. For someone who had built her career on reading people's faces for signs of deception, his evasiveness had been troubling, but she had attributed it to the stress of preparing for both a wedding and a massive public offering. Rohan, she said carefully, settling onto the white leather sofa and patting the cushion beside her. I know tonight should be about celebrating, but I've been thinking about the IPO documentation you showed my father last month. Some of the technical specifications seemed unusual for a blockchain platform. Rohan's fingers stopped moving across his phone screen for just a fraction of a second before he resumed typing. What kind of unusual? He asked, his tone deliberately casual, but Priya caught the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The transaction processing speeds you're claiming, she continued, watching his reaction carefully. Your prospectus says Quantum Dynamics can process 50,000 transactions per second, but when I ran those numbers against current blockchain capabilities, even the most advanced platforms can only handle about 7,000. That's a significant discrepancy. This time Rohan did look up, and for a moment Priya saw something flash across his features that made her stomach clench. It was gone so quickly she might have imagined it, replaced by his charming smile and a laugh that sounded just a little too forced. My brilliant wife, he said, crossing the room to sit beside her and taking her hands in his. This is exactly why I fell in love with you. Your mind is incredible, but you're thinking in terms of traditional blockchain architecture. Quantum Dynamics isn't traditional anything. He began stroking her palms with his thumbs, a gesture she usually found soothing, but tonight it felt like a distraction technique. We've developed something completely revolutionary. Quantum encrypted distributed ledger technology that operates on principles that haven't been publicly documented yet. That's why the numbers seem impossible by current standards. We're literally 5 years ahead of the competition. Priya had heard similar explanations from corporate executives who were trying to hide accounting fraud or inflate their company's capabilities to attract investors. The language was always the same vague, technical jargon designed to sound impressive while providing no actual substance. Can you show me the technical documentation? She asked. I mean the real specs, not the simplified version in the IPO prospectus. If we're going to be business partners as well as married, I should understand exactly how our technology works. Rohan's hands stilled on hers, and when he looked in her eyes, she saw something that made her blood run cold. For just an instant, his expression was completely unguarded, and what she saw there wasn't love or pride in his innovation. It was calculation, the look of someone weighing options and measuring risks. Of course, he said smoothly, but his voice had changed subtly. All the documentation is in my private office. We can go through everything tomorrow. Tonight should be about us, not business. He leaned in to kiss her, but Priya found herself pulling back slightly. Actually, she said, I'm pretty wired from all the excitement. Would you mind if I made some tea? Maybe we could look at a few of the documents now. I'm genuinely curious about the quantum encryption algorithms. The change in Rohan's demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable to someone trained in reading human behavior under pressure. His smile became fixed, his breathing slightly shallow, and when he stood up from the sofa, his movements had lost their natural fluidity. You know what? Let me get the tea, he said. You must be exhausted from today. Why don't you get comfortable, and I'll bring everything to you. As he walked toward the kitchen, Priya noticed he was carrying his phone, and she could see him typing rapidly as he moved. Who was he texting at 1:30 in the morning on their wedding night? Her analytical mind, the same one that had detected millions of dollars in corporate fraud over the past 5 years, was now turning its full attention to her husband's behavior, and every instinct she had developed was telling her that something was very, very wrong. While Rohan was in the kitchen, Priya walked quietly to his home office, a glass-walled space that overlooked the city and housed the computers where he claimed to be developing the revolutionary technology that would make them billionaires. His desk was pristine, almost sterile, with only a high-end laptop and a few carefully arranged items that looked more like props than working tools. She had never been allowed in this space before, with Rohan always claiming it contained proprietary technology too sensitive to share, but tonight felt different. Tonight she was his wife, his business partner, and she had every right to understand what she had just invested her reputation in by marrying him. The laptop was password protected, but years of forensic accounting had taught Priya to notice details that others missed. There, barely visible under the wireless mouse, was a small piece of paper with what appeared to be login credentials. Her heart began racing as she realized that either Rohan was incredibly careless with security for someone handling billion-dollar technology, or he had left this information where she would find it deliberately. Neither possibility made sense for someone who claimed to be protecting revolutionary innovations. From the kitchen came the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing, the whistle of the electric kettle, and the soft ping of text messages being sent and received. Priya estimated she had maybe 5 minutes before Rohan returned with the tea, 5 minutes to either confirm her suspicions or put her fears to rest. Her fingers trembled slightly as she entered the password and watched the laptop screen illuminate with what should have been the command center of a $3 billion technology empire. What she found instead would change everything she thought she knew about the man she had just married, and set in motion a chain of events that would turn their honeymoon suite into a crime scene before the night was over. The laptop screen revealed a desktop that looked nothing like what Priya had expected from a cutting-edge technology company. Instead of sophisticated development software or blockchain applications, she found herself staring at a collection of folders with names that made her blood freeze. Investor communications, fake technical reports, shell company documentation, and most damning of all, exit strategy Swiss accounts. This wasn't the command center of a revolutionary tech startup. This was the digital headquarters of what appeared to be one of the most sophisticated financial frauds she had ever encountered. Her hands moved instinctively to the technical reports folder, years of forensic training taking over as her personal emotions receded behind professional focus. What she found inside made her stomach lurch. Document after document of fabricated blockchain specifications, fake performance metrics, and completely fictional technical achievements. The quantum encryption technology that Rohan had described so convincingly to investors existed only in these elaborate fictions. Every claim about transaction speeds, security protocols, and revolutionary algorithms was a carefully crafted lie supported by falsified data and testimonials from non-existent technical experts. But this wasn't some amateur scam. The documentation was sophisticated enough to fool even experienced venture capitalists, complete with fake academic citations, fraudulent performance benchmarks, and fabricated partnerships with legitimate technology companies. Someone had invested serious time and expertise into making quantum dynamics appear to be exactly the kind of breakthrough that investors dreamed of finding. The level of detail was staggering, from fake employee profiles on the company website to elaborate technical white papers that sounded credible but described technology that was physically impossible with current computing capabilities. The investor communications folder revealed the true scope of the operation. Rohan hadn't just deceived a few gullible investors. He had systematically targeted some of India's most prominent venture capital firms, international hedge funds, and even sovereign wealth funds from Singapore and Dubai. The total amount of pre-IPO investments he had secured based on his fabricated technology was approaching $3 billion, money that was sitting in accounts controlled by a web of shell companies registered in Mauritius, Cayman Islands, and Switzerland. Priya's professional mind cataloged every piece of evidence with cold efficiency, but her personal world was crumbling as she realized the implications. Every conversation they had shared about their future together, every plan they had made for combining their business empires, every moment of intimacy when he had spoken about revolutionizing the technology industry had been built on lies. She wasn't just married to a fraud. She was now legally and financially connected to what could be the biggest corporate scam in Indian history. From the kitchen came the sound of the kettle shutting off, followed by the clink of china cups being arranged on a tray. Rohan would be returning any moment, and Priya realized with crystal clarity that she was in immediate danger. Her reputation as the corporate hunter wasn't just professional credential anymore. It was a death sentence. Rohan knew exactly what she was capable of, knew that she had the expertise to unravel his entire operation and the connections in law enforcement and regulatory agencies to destroy him completely. There was no scenario in which she could discover this fraud, and he could allow her to live. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she opened the email application and began forwarding the most damaging documents to her secure personal account. If something happened to her tonight, at least there would be evidence of what she had discovered. But as she typed, she became aware of an eerie silence from the kitchen. The sounds of tea preparation had stopped, and she couldn't hear Rohan moving around anymore. Had he realized what she was doing? Was he already planning his next move? The Swiss accounts folder contained banking information that made Priya's head spin. Rohan hadn't just stolen $3 billion from investors. He had been systematically moving money out of India for months, converting rupees to cryptocurrency, then transferring the digital assets to accounts in countries with strict banking privacy laws. This wasn't a desperate plan conceived in panic. This was a methodical preparation for disappearing with one of the largest stolen fortunes in history. As she scrolled through transaction records, Priya noticed something that made her hands shake. The largest money transfers had all occurred within the past 2 weeks, right around the time of their wedding preparations. Their marriage wasn't a romantic union or even a business partnership. It was the final phase of Rohan's exit strategy. By marrying her, he had gained access to her international business relationships and her reputation for legitimacy. Her name on documents would make it easier to move money internationally without triggering regulatory scrutiny. She hadn't just been deceived. She had been recruited as an unknowing accomplice in her own husband's escape plan. The soft sound of footsteps on marble flooring made her freeze. Rohan was returning, and from the deliberate pace of his movement, she suspected he already knew what she had discovered. There was no way to close the laptop and pretend she had never seen the evidence. The documents were too damning, the implications too massive, and her expertise too well known for her to convincingly feign ignorance. As the footsteps grew closer, Priya realized that the next few minutes would determine whether she lived to expose the biggest fraud of her career or became its final victim. She could hear him breathing in the doorway behind her, could sense his presence even though she hadn't turned around. When she finally did pivot in the chair to face him, the man standing there holding a tray of tea looked nothing like the charming groom who had taken sacred vows with her just hours earlier. His expression was cold and calculating, and in his eyes she saw the predator that had been hidden behind months of romantic deception. "Find anything interesting?" he asked quietly, setting the tray down on the desk beside the laptop with movements that seemed almost casual, but Priya noticed he was positioning himself between her and the door. "Find anything interesting?" Rohan's voice carried a tone Priya had never heard before, stripped of all warmth and charm, replaced by something that made her skin crawl. She forced herself to meet his gaze directly, drawing on years of experience, confronting corporate criminals who had been caught in their lies. But this felt different. This wasn't a boardroom or courthouse. This was their bedroom, and the man blocking her exit was someone she had trusted with her life just hours ago. "Quite interesting," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Quantum dynamics is very impressive, Rohan. Much more creative than I gave you credit for. $3 billion in fake investments, shell companies in 7 countries, and technology that exists only in fabricated documents. It's actually brilliant, in a completely sociopathic way." Rohan's facade cracked completely, and for the first time since she had known him, Priya was seeing the real person behind the carefully constructed persona. He moved closer to the desk, his movements predatory and deliberate. "You couldn't just be a normal wife, could you?" he said, his voice carrying a bitterness that shocked her. "You couldn't just enjoy the luxury, the status, the money. You had to dig. You had to investigate your own husband on your wedding night." "You married me because of my expertise," Priya shot back, standing up from the chair and facing him directly. "You knew exactly who I was when you proposed. Did you really think I wouldn't notice that your technology was impossible? That your numbers didn't add up? You married the corporate hunter, and then acted surprised when I hunted." The laugh that escaped from Rohan's throat was cold and humorless. "I married you because your reputation was useful for moving money internationally without regulatory scrutiny. Your name on documents opens doors that would stay closed for me. But you were supposed to trust me blindly, like a good Indian wife. You were supposed to be grateful for the lifestyle I was providing and not ask uncomfortable questions." Priya felt rage building in her chest, not just at the deception, but at the patronizing assumption that she would be content to live as a decorative accessory to his criminal empire. "You stole $3 billion from investors who trusted you," she said, her voice rising. "Pension funds, charitable foundations, families who believed they were investing in the future of technology. You destroyed lives to fund your fantasy of being a tech mogul. I created opportunity where none existed," Rohan countered, his own anger beginning to show. "Those investors were throwing money at anything that sounded innovative. I gave them exactly what they wanted to hear. If they were too stupid to verify the technology themselves, that's not my fault. It's fraud, Rohan. It's theft on a massive scale. And now you've made me an accessory by marrying me and using my reputation to legitimize your operations." Priya moved toward the laptop, intending to continue documenting the evidence. But Rohan stepped sideways to block her access. "You're not going anywhere near that computer," he said quietly, and something in his tone made Priya's blood freeze. "And you're not going to be reporting this to anyone. Too much money is at stake, and too many people are depending on this operation succeeding." For the first time, Priya realized that Rohan might not be working alone. The sophistication of the fraud, the international scope of the money laundering, the elaborate technical documentation. This was too complex for one person to execute. "Who else is involved?" she demanded. "How many people are part of this?" Rohan's smile was predatory now, completely devoid of any warmth. "Let's just say that some very powerful people have invested significant resources in making sure quantum dynamics succeeds exactly as planned. People who don't react well to obstacles or complications. People who view exposure of this operation as an existential threat to their own interests." The implication was clear, and Priya felt a chill run down her spine as she realized how much danger she was actually in. This wasn't just about a husband deceiving his wife. This was about a criminal conspiracy involving amounts of money and levels of power that would motivate people to kill without hesitation. "You're threatening me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm explaining reality," Rohan replied. "You have 2 choices, Priya. You can forget what you've seen tonight, play the role of the supportive wife, and enjoy a very comfortable life funded by money that's already been stolen and can't be returned. Or you can try to expose this operation and discover exactly how far powerful people will go to protect billions of dollars." Priya's mind was racing, calculating options and probabilities with the same analytical precision she used to unravel corporate fraud. But every scenario she could envision ended badly for her. If she agreed to remain silent, she would be trapped in a marriage built on lies, complicit in an ongoing criminal enterprise, and always vulnerable to being eliminated if she became inconvenient. If she tried to expose the fraud, she would be fighting not just Rohan, but an entire network of criminals with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. There's a third option, she said slowly, moving toward the office door. I could walk out of here right now, get in my car, and drive straight to the Economic Offenses Wing of the Mumbai Police. By morning, this entire operation would be under investigation. Rohan's expression darkened, and he moved to intercept her path to the door. No, Priya. There really isn't a third option. Not anymore. You've seen too much, and you know too much. The only question now is whether this ends quietly or violently. The man standing between her and freedom bore no resemblance to the charming entrepreneur who had courted her for 6 months or the devoted groom who had taken sacred vows with her just hours earlier. This was a criminal who had been backed into a corner, and Priya's expertise in reading human behavior told her that he was already committed to whatever actions were necessary to protect his operation. As he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew something that glinted in the candlelight, she realized that her wedding night was about to become the final case of her career. The crystal paperweight in Rohan's hand caught the candlelight as he weighed it thoughtfully, and Priya realized with horrifying clarity that he had planned for this possibility. Everything in the office had been arranged deliberately. The laptop password left where she would find it, the documents easily accessible, even the heavy glass object, now serving as a weapon. He had wanted her to discover the truth, had been testing whether she could be trusted to remain silent or if she would need to be eliminated. You orchestrated all of this, she whispered, backing toward the window as understanding dawned. The password, the files, everything. You want to know what I would do. Rohan nodded slowly, his grip tightening on the paperweight. I needed to be certain about your loyalty before we move to the next phase. Unfortunately, you've proven exactly as principled and stubborn as your reputation suggested. That makes you a liability I can't afford. Priya's back hit the floor-to-ceiling window, 200 feet above Mumbai's sleeping streets. Below, Marine Drive sparkled innocently while in this penthouse. Her fairy tale marriage was revealing itself as the deadliest deception she had ever encountered. The investor's money is already gone, isn't it? She asked, buying time while her mind searched desperately for options. You've been moving it out of the country for months. Every rupee. Rohan confirmed with something that might have been pride. Tomorrow morning, the IPO will be announced as successfully completed, and I'll be India's newest billionaire. By tomorrow night, I'll be on a private jet to a country that doesn't extradite financial criminals. This penthouse, this life, this marriage, it was all just set decoration for the final act. The realization hit Priya like a physical blow. You never intended to stay married to me. I was just another prop in your performance. You were a very expensive prop, Rohan said, moving closer, but necessary for legitimacy. Unfortunately, props sometimes malfunction and need to be discarded. Priya's hand found her phone in her lehenga pocket, and with movements she prayed Rohan couldn't see, she activated the emergency recording function. If she was going to die tonight, at least there would be evidence of who killed her and why. $3 billion, she said loudly, hoping the microphone would pick up her words. That's how much you've stolen from investors using fake blockchain technology and fraudulent IPO documentation. Rohan's eyes narrowed as he registered what she was doing, and his voice turned deadly quiet. Put the phone down, Priya. No, she said firmly, surprising herself with her calm tone. I've spent my entire career exposing people like you. I'm not going to stop now, just because I made the mistake of marrying one of them. The attack came faster than she expected. Rohan lunged forward with the paperweight raised, but years of martial arts training kicked in as Priya ducked and rolled away from the window. The crystal struck the reinforced glass with enough force to spider-web the entire panel, and for a moment both of them stared at the damaged window that now offered a terrifying view of the street far below. You can't kill me without destroying yourself, Priya gasped, scrambling toward the office door. I've already forwarded the evidence to multiple email accounts. If anything happens to me, everything will be exposed automatically. But Rohan was beyond rational calculation now, his carefully constructed persona completely shattered to reveal the predator beneath. He grabbed a heavy bronze statue from the desk and pursued her into the main living area, where scattered rose petals from their wedding night now seemed like a mocking reminder of the romantic fantasy that had never existed. The struggle that followed was brief, but vicious. Hotel security cameras would later show that it lasted less than 4 minutes. But for Priya, fighting desperately for her life against a man who had been systematically deceiving her for months, it felt like an eternity. She managed to reach the kitchen and grab a knife, but Rohan was stronger and had the advantage of having planned for this confrontation. When Mumbai police found her body 3 hours later, after building security reported sounds of violence from the penthouse, Priya was still clutching her phone. The recording she had made contained not just Rohan's confession to the fraud, but also his threats against her life and the sounds of the final struggle. By morning, the evidence she had forwarded to her backup email accounts had been retrieved by investigators, exposing the full scope of the quantum dynamics fraud. Rohan was found on the penthouse balcony, having apparently panicked after killing his wife, and attempted to escape by climbing down to a lower floor. He fell to his death in the attempt, taking with him the locations of the hidden offshore accounts containing most of the stolen billions. The money was never fully recovered, leaving thousands of investors financially ruined and families destroyed by their trust in what had seemed like India's most promising tech entrepreneur. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of investment fraud and the lengths criminals will go to protect massive illegal operations. But for those who knew Priya Agarwal, it was remembered as the final victory of a woman who chose to expose the truth even when she knew it would cost her everything. Her recording not only brought justice for her own murder, but prevented Rohan's criminal network from claiming any more victims. The sacred fire that had blessed their wedding ceremony had long since burned out, but the evidence Priya died protecting continued to burn bright, ensuring that her last case became the most important one of her career.